Hi everyone, and welcome to week 3 of your business admin course. I'm Michaela. You should have known me by now, hopefully. Today we are going to be looking at managing expectations with professional behaviour. So your learning objectives for today, we're going to hopefully understand the relationship between needs, expectations and satisfaction. You are then going to write your own scenario using some creative writing to outline when a customer is not satisfied with a service that they receive. And then you're going to have a look and describe how professional behaviours can give a positive impression and benefit the organisation. So your first piece of work here is on expectations and satisfaction. So expectations are set from past experiences, they're set from recommendations, and they're set from any sort of published material or marketing material. And it's important to understand that if the expectations are not met at all, then there is no satisfaction. So keep that in your mind for a moment there. So let's have a look a little bit more at past experiences and how they link to expectations. So you could have had an amazing past experience with a company. So it could be, for example, a company that you insured your house or contents insurance with. You could have had a really nice service from them, a really good price as well. It might be that your house insurance is now up for renewal and you go back to them and they want to charge you £200 more even though you never put in a claim. So your expectations of that company, because of your past experience, were high. So because the price has now gone up, you're going to feel quite disappointed. How do recommendations link to your expectations? So let's just have a look at this one here. So your friends could have told you to try out a new cafe or restaurant, and she might have said the food was the best that she'd had in years. So maybe it's an Italian bistro with the best pasta that she's ever tasted. So because your friend's recommendation is really positive, your expectations are going to be really high because you want to taste the best food that you've had in years as well. Marketing material, and how does that link to expectations? So if the marketing material that you see has people smiling, they look very approachable like the lady in the picture, maybe there's a good price on there as well and it really appeals to you, then your expectations are going to be high. If you then ring them and you only get a substandard service, you're not going to feel perhaps very happy with that because your expectations were set from looking at that marketing material. If the person you speak to on the phone about the service they're providing just don't know what the price is, then you're going to feel quite disappointed. So expectations and satisfaction. What I've done next is I've put some silly pictures on just to help you to understand the relationship between expectations and satisfaction. So I'm sure many of you have been to McDonald's and the expectation from the picture is the left-hand side one, but the reality is, albeit that is rather squished, a very squished burger. Okay, so the one on the left is probably propped up with cocktail sticks inside. The one on the right, I don't know, it looks like it's been around the drive-thru a couple of times itself, doesn't it? This one here, so perhaps you're out with a child and they ask for a panda lolly and you open it and it looks a bit like, I don't really know, to be honest. Just a funny shape, an M, perhaps. You know, the expectation is that you're going to get a panda lolly. The reality, well, I don't know, I can't see a panda there myself. This one here, so in the classroom people often say to me, their buses are never on time anyway. But at least if you expect the bus not to be on time, you may be pleasantly surprised if it is on time. So let's have a look at this here. This is really useful for question 2. So if you start at the bottom there, what you need to do is identify what the customer needs are. You then need to identify what the customer expects. You need to try and meet their expectations and then your customer should be satisfied. So what does your customer want? What do they need? What do they want? What have they come here for? What are they expecting of you? Are they expecting you to know absolutely everything? Are they expecting you just to have a quick phone call with them? Try and meet those expectations. Perhaps you just need to have a quick phone call with them about an email they've sent. Perhaps you need to give them lots and lots of information. So meet those expectations, whatever they are, and then your customer should leave you satisfied. So what you've got next is a scenario in your work booklet. Okay, what I'd like you to do is have a read of that scenario. I'll probably get quite a bit tongue-tied if I try and read this all at once out loud. So I'm going to leave you to read that yourselves. So what I would like you to do is have a read of that and tell me, is Mrs. van der Woodsen going to be satisfied with the service that she received from the school receptionist? So just pause this video here and have a read of the scenario. So is she going to be satisfied for question 1? No, she's probably not going to be satisfied. And why? Well, she's been on hold a very long time. She didn't find out what she wanted to find out. She didn't have her needs met. She didn't have her expectations met. The school is said to be outstanding, and the service that she received just was not outstanding. So for question 2, what I would like you to do is identify what the needs are of Mrs. van der Woodsen. Then, what are the expectations of Mrs. van der Woodsen and where did they come from? And then we're going to state the relationship between her expectations and satisfaction. I have got some more information on the next slide if you're really stuck here, but try and have a go if you're not. So what are Mrs. van der Woodsen's needs? What are her expectations? Where did they come from? And what is the relationship between her expectations and satisfaction? So her needs. She wants to know if the school is accessible for her son who uses a wheelchair. Her expectations. She expected a high level of customer service, and the reason for that is because the Ofsted report, the way that schools are graded, was outstanding. She had a recommendation from the neighbour, and the school had a great mission statement which she liked. So what is the relationship between her expectations and satisfaction? So she expected an amazing service. The school's outstanding, so why not? But she didn't get this. In fact, she didn't even get a good level of customer service, so she's not going to be at all satisfied. The school should have found out what her needs were, what she expected, an outstanding service, and tried to be understanding in the customer service on the phone call. She would have then... outstanding, not understanding. They should have tried to be outstanding as best they could in the phone call. Now, as the receptionist didn't know the information, why not just say, oh, I'm not entirely sure actually, but let me just take your name and number and I'll give you a call back shortly when I've spoken to the head, spoken to the principal. There's ways and means of dealing with situations, and the way that this was dealt with was just not right, which is why she's not satisfied. So next I would like you to create your own scenario. So your own scenario for question 3, what you have got to do is use a bit of creative writing. So I want you to think about who the characters are. I want you to think about where the scenario is set. What does the customer expect? Why does the customer service not meet the expectations? And how could it be improved for next time? And then right at the very bottom, you just need to show who you would report this to, so probably your manager. If you are really stuck on how to get started, you can use this example layout to begin with if you wish to. Some of you will be quite happy to work without this. Some of you might be thinking, oh, I haven't written anything like this in ages. So For example, I was working in an office when a customer asked me and my colleague, what can they ask? When a customer asked me and my colleague, what can I use your printer? The customer said, I need to print out my CV, I've got a job interview next week. I tried to respond with, no, you're not allowed to use the printer because it is for staff only. And my colleague said, yes, she's right. But the customer started shouting and said, but I've got to do it for my CV, you're being so rude. So I didn't meet the customer expectations because they expected to be able to print out the CV. So next time I would try and explain this with more empathy than I perhaps showed the first time. I would need to report this to the manager in case of a complaint. Sorry that I stalled so badly on there, I couldn't think of one. Try and use your own examples though, I'm sure there's plenty out there. You could base it on perhaps a scenario that you've had, maybe in a restaurant. You can relate it to like an office, a call centre. I could have used my Eon example, couldn't I? So can you create your own scenario for me now? So you can pause this video here while you write that. Okay, so we saw on the last few slides that the receptionist at the school could have been much more professional in the way that she handled that call. So when working in an office, you're going to be using the telephone. You need to ensure that you use professional behaviours to create a positive impression for that customer. So what behaviours would this include? What behaviours are professional whilst on the phone? So just remember, they can't see you. So what you need to do is make sure that you're answering professionally using the company greeting. Good morning, Plato Training, Michaela speaking, how can I help? Introduce yourself, so that's normally part of your greeting. A lot of companies expect you to answer within 3 rings so the customer isn't waiting around. It's recommended that you smile when you're talking on the phone. So actually, whilst I'm recording these, I try and smile so that I don't sound too miserable too. Take accurate messages. What you don't want to do is make an error in the message that you take down. You need to make sure you're repeating the information back to that customer to make sure that the information that you get is correct, especially if it's a phone number and they're asking for a call back. I always find that O and 8 sound quite similar in some accents. You need to make sure you're speaking clearly and politely, you need to listen carefully, and you also need to make sure that you've got that knowledge to answer their questions. You don't want to try and make it up on the spot. So how can these behaviours create a positive impression and benefit the organisation? So I've got a huge table here, so you will need to pause this page to have a good read of it. But what I've done here is given you some examples of how these behaviours can create a positive impression for the customer and how the behaviour can benefit the organisation. I don't want you all to use the top 4. I want you to sort of mix it up a bit, use your own wording as well. You can stick to my telephone behaviours, but you need to write a bit more than what I've written because you're going to have to develop it into sentences anyway for the positive impression and for the benefits of the organisation sections. Let's just have a look at the top one. So answering professionally using the company greeting. So the customer is positive because they know they've called the correct company, and it benefits the organisation because it shows a professional quality service. Taking accurate messages. So it's positive for the customer because there's going to be no misinterpretation, and it's good for the organisation because there's going to be no complaints for wrong information. Listening carefully. The customer won't have to repeat themselves, so hopefully it'll benefit the organisation because the customers will be happier, quicker, and there'll be more sales. So just pause this page here while you have a read of the rest of those. Now what you're going to do is you're going to answer question 4. So I've put it in a table format for you. So you're going to state how the caller's behaviours can create a positive impression and state how they can benefit the organisation. So you need to do, I think it's 4 of these. Just double check your worksheet. I've not written it on here for some reason. So I think it's 4 behaviours that you need to do. You need to show how they create a positive impression and how they can benefit the organisation. Remember that you have to write in sentences when you are stating. So outbound calls. So when you're making outbound calls to customers and other companies, you need to make sure that the phone number and contact name that you have are correct. So how could you do this? What could you do to make sure the number is right for the company? So you need to check your customer database to check the customer's contact name and number. You need to make sure you know how to pronounce the name. You can ask a colleague if you're not sure. If you're phoning another business, perhaps you've got another business that you need to ring for as a supplier, perhaps for something that you sell. You need to make sure the contact number that you have is up to date. You can check online, or it may be on your company's database. So for question 5, when making outbound calls, you need to make sure you call the correct company and use the correct number. How could you confirm these details before making the call? So that goes back to the slide before, so you can have a look back at there. Pause this video here while you write that. Confidential information. So we've covered lots and lots on confidential information, but I cannot stress enough how important it is when you are working with customers' personal details. So confidential information can be given to you on the phone, or it can be given to you when you are welcoming customers as well into the reception area of your office. What examples of confidential information may customers give you? So over the phone, they could give you their name, their address, the date of birth. They could give you their national insurance numbers, their credit card numbers. If you're working in a hospital, it could be a health issue. If they're doing a course like yourselves, we need things like your passport numbers, your driving license numbers. I think most of you gave that either over the phone or by email. When you are welcoming visitors, you need to make sure that you are keeping their names, why they're attending, passport copies, registration details for their car, confidential as well. So most of that information, apart from your passports, would be on a signing in sheet. And the reason I've put passport copies on there is because I was sort of thinking about perhaps if you work for like a job agency, they often take photocopies of your passport to prove who you are for your interviews. So why must this information be treated as confidential, and how can we ensure it is kept safe? So it must be treated as confidential because it is protected under law. So we've looked at these 2 laws already, but like I keep saying, I cannot stress enough that you need to fully understand about data protection. So it's under the Data Protection Act of 1998 and under GDPR of 2018. How can we ensure it is kept safe? So we can make sure it's safe by only storing the information that is needed for as long as it is needed. We also must make sure we only share information with people who need to know about it. We need to shred any paper notes with information on. We need to ensure that passwords are used to protect data, and we need to ensure that locks are used to protect paper-based data, so such as locks on cabinets and filing cabinets. So you have a table here on question 6. I want you to give me 2 pieces of information that are going to be kept confidential over the phone, so make sure it is relevant to the phone calls, and 2 pieces of information that are relevant to welcoming visitors. So think about things that you would be writing down, that they would be writing down if they're with you. Okay, so security in the office. So again, we're looking at confidentiality. Like I said, it is a big key topic when you're working in administration. So how can we ensure that people do not enter the office and access personal data? You could get an intruder coming in, a criminal, it could be someone absolutely innocent who's just entered the building incorrectly by accident. But what measures can be put in place to make sure that data is secure no matter what the reasoning is for that person coming in? So data needs to be kept in locked filing cabinets. If they're locked and the key is removed, then there is no way that that data can be accessed by an intruder. You need to have passwords on your computers, so you need to be protected that way, and those passwords need to be updated regularly. All visitors must sign into the building, and visitors must be issued with a visitor badge. Usually this is on a lanyard around your neck, so that makes them identifiable. Quite often they use a different coloured lanyard for a visitor. Visitors must be supervised at all times. So you must know where they are. You know, obviously if they pop into the toilet, you don't need to supervise that, but you need to understand where they are in that building so they're not going into somewhere that's got secure data in it. If someone is in the office without a visitor badge, they need to be escorted off premises, perhaps by security, but you also need to think about a data breach. If they've tampered with something, you may need to get the police involved. So that's your last question for this section. So identify how we can ensure that people do not enter the building and access information that is confidential. So that's the end of this slideshow here. So I've talked through this quite quickly. I hope that was okay. I want you to have understood the relationship between needs, expectations and satisfaction. You should have written your own scenario when a customer is not satisfied with the service that they receive, and you should have described the professional behaviours that can give a positive impression and benefit the organisation. Thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, then you'll get notifications for when the next videos are uploaded.